everyone. Welcome to our ongoing Attract Capital webinar series. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm here with, as always, Attract Capital CEO, Dave Barnett.
Hi, everybody.
So today we are going to talk about equity alternatives for unlocking acquisition financing. So before we get into the nuts and bolts, Dave, can you tell us a little bit more about what acquisition financing is? Because I hear that and all I think of is a mortgage you take out for buying a house or something.
Well, that's a really good instinctive thought to have about acquisition financing because it's essentially a loan that's used to purchase a company. So it's very similar. It's not dissimilar from mortgage financing, Sarah.
Okay, so I'm glad I was at least on the same page there. So I think my understanding too is that there's different ways to get it. So what are the different types of acquisition funding you can get in a market?
Sure. Well, there's a few different types of acquisition financing that are available. You have bank loans, then you have mezzanine loans, which are provided by mezzanine lenders. Then you have unitranche loans, which are a combination of both. And then you have equity structured investments, which could be preferred equity, it could be common equity, or it could be structured equity. So there's a number of different forms of capital that you can use for acquisition financing.
So you mentioned a lot of different forms of equity, but I'm assuming some are more common than the others. So what are the main types of equity that you see?
So when you're doing a deal, the most important equity that goes into the transaction is cash equity, and cash is the king.
Okay.
So if you're buying a company, you really need to have a certain amount of cash to put in it because it's hard to get a lender to believe that you really have skin in the game unless they're putting cash in the company. And usually lenders like to see at least 30% of the equity beneath their loan. And the question is the issue is, as you said earlier, there's equity alternatives. So it doesn't always have to be cash, but you have to be mindful of the different structural technicalities to these equity alternatives in order to have a lender consider them as an equity alternative.
Okay, so going with the house analogy and mortgage, you need to have 10% or more in order for them to give you a loan for your house. And there are other things you can do to get to that, but maybe the banks weren't going to trust you. And so I'm curious about those alternative forms. So what are some that you see?
So staying with your 10% and now comparison, it's a good one. So 10% would be the cash amount, or 10 to 15% would be the cash amount that the acquisition lender would want to see in. But then they also want to see in total the equity amount to be closer to 30%.
Oh, okay.
So you've got to get from 10 or 15% cash equity to 30%. And there's a couple of different ways you get there. You can get there with seller notes, which is it's part of the purchase price that the seller does not take out at closing and agrees to take it on the back end, and it's structurally subordinated to the lender. Then you can have contributed equity. Contributed equity is value in the business that the buyer of the company contributes into the capital structure, or it can be residual equity that the seller is rolling into the deal as well. And the third thing is, and this happens less frequently, but if you're getting a really good purchase price on a company, you're getting a sweetheart deal, as they say in the market, you can often make the argument that you don't have to put in as much equity because you're buying the company at 10 to 20% less than fair market value. So those are the three: seller notes, contributed equity, or purchase price equity. And those are added to the cash equity to get to the 30%.
Okay, so those get you to 30, but just to be clear, even with those other types of equity, you still need cash.
Right, you can't, so I'm glad you're bringing that up again. A lot of people call Attract Capital and say, I want to buy all these companies, and the first question we have is, do you have money to put into the deal? And they say, well, we're putting in seller notes. And we say to them, well, then you really aren't in a position to buy the company because none of the lenders that we deal with, and we deal with hundreds of lenders, want to get behind an acquisition unless the buyer has their own money in it.
It's too risky for them, yeah.
It's absolutely too risky.
Okay.
So you have to have cash, and the fact that you get a lot of either contributed equity or seller note or purchase price equity doesn't obviate the need for cash.
It's like a bonus confidence, but they still need it. It's not that they're not going to get away from that.
They really need it, and everybody should have it because you're not looked at as serious. But as Sarah mentioned in the intro, these are bona fide equity alternatives, and they can help you to get to the 30%.
Okay, so I think our main takeaway here is that if you're a sponsor and you want to do a buyout, cash is important, but you have alternatives, and Attract Capital can help you get there. So thank you very much, and stay tuned to our future webinars.
Thank you.
Bye.